Welcome everyone to today's webinar, A Wholehearted Life, One Step at a Time. Please note that all attendees are in listen-only mode and that this webinar is being recorded. I'm Lori Sjogren, Community Program and Services Director for the National Ataxia Foundation, and I'll be assisting with today's webinar along with our Communications Manager, Stephanie Lucas. Questions for the webinar speaker can be typed in the Questions tab found in your control panel, and we'll answer as many of your questions regarding this topic as time allows prior to the end time of today's session. So as your questions arise, please send those to us, and any unanswered or unrelated questions can be sent to naf@ataxia.org. For attendees joining us live, there's a handout for this webinar that's also available for you to download in the handout section of your control panel. So be sure to download that as a takeaway to today's webinar. We have a really thought-provoking and inspirational speaker for today's webinar. Teresa Chase is a professional coach offering experiences for growth and transformation. Teresa is also an assistant professor of nursing mental health at Colorado Mesa University in Grand Junction, Colorado. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you so much, Lori, and thank you everyone who's out there in internet land. My name is I'm Dr. Terry Chase, and I'm going to tell you more about me as my session and presentation goes on this morning. But I want to give a big shout out to the National Ataxia Foundation for being able to make my work available to you via this webinar. I was scheduled for the big conference in Denver in early March, and as we all know, that was canceled right away as the COVID-19 epidemic and pandemic strengthened in our country. So welcome. I also want to give a big shout out to those of you who might have been in Denver 5 years ago. I was also presenting there. I did a big talk on sexual health and compassionate care. So I appreciate all of you who were there that day, and for all the new people and folks that I haven't met yet, I welcome you. So let's get started. So my talk today is titled A Wholehearted Life, One Step at a Time. And it's really about my story with some lessons that I learned in hopes that you can apply those to your life as well. There we go. So I do have to provide some disclaimers that I have to, what happened here, Lori? There we go. So I do need to let you know that I do have financial relationships with Craig Hospital in Denver, Colorado. I still work for them. I also am a assistant professor of nursing at Colorado Mesa University in Grand Junction, and I do have my own business as a coach, speaker, and author. So my educational background, you can see I have a few degrees. I have 3 graduate degrees, which as I tell my story, will make sense to you about why in the heck do I have all these degrees, because it was certainly a path I've been following for the last 30-something years. My work experience is extensive in healthcare. I am a registered nurse. At Craig Hospital for 18 years, I ran the patient and family education program, which I loved, making the hard stuff easy for those who are dealing with spinal cord injury and brain injury. And currently now I'm working with young students, nursing students, and really working hard to keep them in the profession before they even graduate in this time of such healthcare strife. I have done a lot of talks, a lot of presentations across the country and into Canada. I do work with people on challenge and developing resilience and really looking at personal and team transition. So hopefully today will be a taste of transformation, a transformational process that you can apply to your life. So what I do is that this picture is when I was working at Craig Hospital. Some of you may be familiar with Helping Hands monkeys. Actually, Helping Hands is out of Boston, Massachusetts. They train Capuchin monkeys to help people with fine motor skills, some emergency management, dialing 911 for people that have high-level injuries or processes that don't enable them to have fine motor skills. So the Capuchin monkey Ayla came to our hospital one day, and it was to me the most joyful day of my entire 18 years there in that capacity. But Ayla spent a lot of time on different people's shoulders, picking through our hair and entertaining us throughout the day. But basically what I do is I teach. I love to teach. I've been a lifelong teacher. This is now the 40th year of my time of being a professional educator. I love to tell stories, so I'll be telling quite a few stories today. I love to support you in your growth, and I'm going to listen. Now, I know the chat box, I'm not going to be able to see the chat box, but we're going to be able to field some questions, and then certainly I'll give you an opportunity to contact me directly if you care to. Love to listen, hear what's going on with you. So I'm going to share my story of challenge, resilience, and growth. For those of you who don't know, I have a spinal cord injury. I have an incomplete T12 injury. I do use a manual wheelchair most of the time. I still can walk some, but I think in that, I want you to know that all of us have stories. All of us have had challenge. And I know learning about the population of folks in the Ataxia, in Ataxia Foundation, in that community, you all are experiencing many, many challenges. I want to provide a fun, interactive and informative opportunity today, although interaction is going to be a little bit different as you put your questions in the chat box, and certainly I'll do my best to interact with you that way. And I really want to support you as an attendee of the virtual 2020 NAF conference. So let me start at the beginning. So this is about 32 years ago, a little over 32 years ago. I was working as a middle school PE teacher here in Grand Junction, Colorado. I was single. I was living the life. I was a basketball and volleyball official for both high school and college. I was one of 2 female referees at the college level on the western slope of Colorado. I loved being an official. I loved being a referee because I got paid to be in the game. And in college, I found out I wasn't going to be a really good basketball player, but I started refereeing back when I was in college. And I loved it. I loved the game. I loved being in the court with with the kids playing the game. I was also in the summers, in between my years of being a middle school PE teacher, I also worked for Outward Bound. And some of you may be familiar with Outward Bound as an outdoor education program that takes people out to the mountains. We have canyon programs, there's river programs, there's ocean programs to really help people learn resilience and learn to work together. So I love doing that. I was a long distance cyclist. I rode my bike, 20, 30, 50 miles on a weekend and many times during the week. So I love doing that. Like I said, I was single, living alone. I didn't have any committed relationships. I always say I was dating a few people at the time. So I really wasn't into commitment. I was really a little bit lost in some ways now that I look back on it. I did have my best companion with me, Shadow, my black dog. And I had a couple of cats. So you can see that my life was, I was living the life of a single person. Teaching, officiating, being an Outward Bound instructor, mountaineering, rock climbing, biking, having a dog, which everybody in Colorado has to have if you're going to be a Coloradan. But something happened. On April 2nd of 1988, I was riding my bike on the outskirts of Grand Junction. I had just come back from a week spending time with my grandmothers. And if those of you who know about visiting grandmothers, at least in my case, it was a lot of sit and eat and sit and eat. So by the time I got back to Grand Junction, I really needed some exercise. So I decided to go out on just a routine 10-mile bike ride just to kind of get the juices flowing. And as I was coming back into town, I had crossed over the Colorado River Bridge, which is a big expanse bridge, a lot of metal. I mean, not a lot of shoulder, but I got across that bridge and I was getting ready to lean into a turn to do what I call my junkyard route. And as I was leaning into that turn, I was well off on the shoulder of the road. It was a wide shoulder at that time. I didn't know it, but a man who was driving drunk was behind me. I didn't know what happened until I was literally on the car, hearing my bicycle crunch underneath the front of this big black hot car. It was a bright sunny Saturday afternoon. And so, he wasn't like he couldn't see me. He just was drunk. I knew at that moment that this was really bad. I also knew that the car was hot as I leaned back on the hood of the car and I heard my bike continuing to crunch. At that moment, he swerved, I rolled off, boom, hit the ground. At that moment, again, it was like, this is really bad and I don't really know what's happening to me. The man who was driving the car took off, left me, and then the very next car stopped. And I remember as I'm laying on the ground trying to catch my breath and dealing with the pain that's going up my back, a man walked up and all I remember is his brown boot. And I grabbed the brown boot and I said, "Where are my legs?" Because my last memory of where my legs were was that they were sticking straight up in the air. And the man said to me, "They're on the ground, right here." And at that moment, there was something about the truth in that moment that was really helpful to me. And I knew that this was a game changer for me. I knew that this was going to be a wake-up call of some type. I didn't know exactly what, but I kept conscious, and I kept with myself during that time. As it turned out, I was picked up by the EMS folks. They came, the ambulance came, they loaded me into the back of a very dull green ambulance, and I was cracking jokes with the EMS workers, telling them that maybe they should put something on top of the roof or the ceiling inside the ambulance so that it wouldn't be so boring. And I think they were like, what is up with this girl? Anyway, I kept talking. I think a lot of it just to keep myself awake and stay conscious. As it turned out, in acute care in the emergency room, I was deemed with a spinal cord injury. I had a T12, like I said, T12 incomplete spinal cord injury, which left me with paralysis of my lower legs, the gluteus maximus, and all those big, powerful muscles that used to enable me to ride my bike and climb mountains. I was at that point transferred to Craig Hospital in Denver. I actually had a doctor come in one night, and he said, we need to talk about rehab. And I'm like, all right, I'm in a morphine haze. I do remember that. And he said, well, here's your choices. You can stay here in Grand Junction and go to our local rehab center, or you can go to Craig Hospital. And I said, well, I knew about the local place. And I said, well, what's this place called Craig? And he said, well, they deal with spinal cord injury. That's their specialty. And there's probably more people your age. And I'm like, all right, sign me up. That's where I'm going to go. So in that moment of a morphine haze, I had to really access my ability to make a decision for myself. I had no family around at the time. They hadn't been able to get into town yet. And I knew that I had to make the best decision possible. So that leads into one of my lessons that I'll talk about in just a minute. But as you might expect, a single athletic, mountain climbing, soccer playing, riding bike kind of girl, I had some challenges. And some of the challenges that came were not just physical. Certainly physical in my thought of, what about my athletic pursuits? Can I still play the game? Because as a PE teacher, and as a middle school PE teacher, my style of teaching was I got in the game with the kids, just gave a few rules, demonstrated a few skills, and off we went. I wasn't sure if I could play the game. I also had some doubts and thoughts about my sexual identity. And really what it came down to was, will anyone love me? So that's to me is a real important realization for any of us going through challenges, physical challenges, disease processes, disabilities. There's always this question of, will anyone love me? I was also challenged with, will I be able to return to my profession as teacher, coach, referee? I did think about mountain climbing and wasn't sure if that was going to be a part of my life again. But really it came down to, will I be able to teach? Will I be able to really do what I feel that I was put on this earth to do? And my self-esteem was challenged as well. I always say that, before I got hurt, I had kind of a swagger, that athletic, confident, I got this, I can call a foul anytime, I can handle that mountain, kind of swagger. But after I got hurt and being in a wheelchair, it took a while for that swagger to return. So fortunately, through the process of rehab, I had good rehab. I learned how to use a wheelchair. I learned to take care of my own personal cares and all the things I needed to do. I learned how to drive again. And I was actually able to get back up on my legs to some degree. And so I was able to return to teaching. I did spend most of my time in the wheelchair. I was able to get up on my crutches a few times. I also learned about barriers in the world. So, and many of you know about this. So this is nothing new. You know this, but I just bring it up because sometimes we think that barriers are just, physical, but they also are attitudinal. And what I think and what I found was what I think and feel and how I see the world could either be a barrier or it could be something that takes away a barrier. I also got very familiar with what others think and feel about me. As I spent more time after rehab out in the world, I noticed that people, that kind of sideways look, like they want to look, but they don't look, or they look over me, or they don't see me at all. So there's that sort of thing. There's also some serious architectural barriers that I think are getting better in the world, in some places better than others. I know in the town that I returned to, Grand Junction, after I got hurt, buildings and facilities and ramps and doors were not very good. But now, 30-something years later, they're much better. And then access. How do I, as someone who uses a wheelchair, get around in the world? Now, fortunately, I was able to get back in a vehicle, get training on using a hand control, and be able to drive, but not everyone has that opportunity. And then I also got to learn about public transportation and the dismal situation with being able to get a bus on time and get to your appointment and get picked up and all of that, and certainly financial barriers. So I'm aware of these things. I have been confronted with these along the way for myself, and I acknowledge that for some of you, some of these barriers may still exist. And again, hopefully my talk today will assist you in dealing with those. I also remembered that my time in Outward Bound was not just climbing up mountains and setting up rock climbs and watching students struggle with their backpacks, but it was about this internal decision about the leader of Outward Bound, the man who started it that way back in the 1950s, 40s and 50s. And he had a lot of sayings, and one of them I remembered quite clearly. And he said, your disability can be your opportunity. Now, Kurt Hahn didn't have people with disabilities in his boats when he took them out on his first Outward Bound trips. What he was talking about was the disability that keeps us stuck where we are. And so his words really inspired me to continue forward and to take the philosophy of Outward Bound into everything that I did. And so I offer that to you as a mantra. Your disability can be your opportunity, and to really think about what opportunity awaits you that you have not yet seen or been aware of. So let me talk about my first lesson that I'd like to share with you. Now, there are many lessons along the way, and I'm only going to pick 3. But the first lesson is around taking the first step. And this story goes that I was still in rehab. I was hurt in April, so I was in the thick of my rehab process through late spring and early summer. And early one June morning, one afternoon, actually, my rec therapist came to me, recreation therapy, and said, "Hey, Terry, we're taking patients out on a special water skiing outing next Tuesday. It'll be an early morning, but I know you can do it. And I think you'd love it." And I'm like, water skiing? What is she talking about? Here I'm in rehab. I can barely get out of bed into my wheelchair. I mean, I can't even take a shower by myself yet, and I'm going to go water skiing? Plus, I have this brace on. And she said, well, talk to your doctor. I'm pretty sure your brace is going to get discontinued here pretty soon. And as soon as he writes okay for outing, water skiing, then you'll go. I said, okay. So I asked my doctor. I said, this crazy recreation therapist said we're going to go water skiing next week. And she asked me to ask you if I can go. And he said, well, you know how those old doctors are. They're kind of sit there and go, yeah, I think that'll be all right. We'll get that brace off. We'll do an x-ray just to make sure you're stable. I'll write the order. I'm like, all right. So 5 or 6 days later, it's Tuesday morning, 6 a.m. The nurses come in. Time to get up, Terry. It's time for your water skiing outing. I'm like, really? It's cold out there. It's June 1st or 2nd, something like that. And in Colorado, the mornings can still be cold. So the nurses get me up. They shove a donut in my mouth and a cup of coffee and throw a blanket on me and make sure I've got, adequate bladder management supplies and all of that. And they roll out. I get on the elevator, roll out to the bus, get on the bus, and a few other patients are in there too, and we're all shivering like, all right, here we go. So we drive from Denver to Boulder. And if any of you are familiar with the Denver to Boulder corridor, back in the day in 1988, you could still make it up to Boulder in about 45 minutes. Now it's not so much. So we get on the bus, we get up to Boulder, and there's a lake that is totally still and flat like glass. Any of you who are water skiers, and some of you up there in Minnesota, I know when it warms up, you can do this, might be water skiers and you're like, ooh, that's just making me drool. Well, I barely have water skied ever in my able-bodied life. So anyway, I look back on it now and go, that was the perfect day to go water skiing because it was nice and flat. So I get out of the bus, they put the PFD on me, they roll me down this ramp, and mind you, it's like now only about 7:30 in the morning, still cold. And so I'm looking around, I see a boat and a chase boat and a couple other things and a few people on the dock, and I said, okay, so where's the water ski? And they're like, right there. Now the ski that's in this picture is not the very first ski I skied on. So the first ski I skied on though was 2 skis with a chair bolted to them. just a basic old plastic office chair bolted to 2 skis. And they're like, that's your ski. And I'm like, all right. So they transfer me onto the ski. They back me up to the edge of the ramp, and they slowly lower me down into the water. Now, mind you, I'm not only freezing because it's 7:30 in the morning on a Colorado early June day, but now I'm going to be dumped into this lake and, to be behind a boat. So I got into the water, I'm literally freezing, and I'm like, all right, the guy hands me the rope and he says, okay, now this is connected to your chair, so you really don't have to do much, just sit there. I'm like, okay, then what? He goes, well, when you're ready and we get the line taut, just say, hit it. I'm like, okay. I'm chattering, freezing. So we get the line taut, I say hit it, and boom, we go. And I'm like, oh my God, here I am, just having had a spinal cord injury, a few weeks into rehab, and I'm on a lake water skiing. And what it taught me was that it's always important to take the first step. And I took many, many steps along the way. And what I found out was I had to let go of the life I had planned so that I could have the life that is waiting for me. Basically, the words of Joseph Campbell, and if any of you are familiar with the hero's journey, that's what he talks about, is we have to take the first step to find out what is the life ahead of us. So I had to take many first steps. I had to get back to teaching. I was back to teaching 5 months after I got hurt. I did some time with my middle school students to familiarize them with my disability, with my wheelchair. I actually got out of my chair, sat on a mat, and had my stopwatch and said, you've got 2 minutes. So each student who wanted to could get in my chair and roll around. So I gave them that experience of what it was like. I got back to officiating. It took me a few years because I was a little scared about how was anyone going to think of me? What were they going to think of me rolling in a wheelchair? And really what I found out was, what do I think of me being in a wheelchair? I did return to officiating. I called up after a few years of, can I do this? Can I do this? I called up the officiating group in Denver. I said, yeah, I've got 10 years of experience. By this time I'm living in Denver. 10 years of experience. I've been a high school, college ref, blah, blah, blah. All right, good. We'll give you an assignment. I'm like, perfect. I didn't tell them I was in a wheelchair. So I show up to my first assignment. The other referee looks at me like, who are you? And I'm like, don't worry, I got this. Toss the ball, the game starts, we're off. The kids never thought a second of me being in a wheelchair. I had to learn that for myself though. I learned to live independently. I came back, lived by myself. I had to learn how to take care of Shadow. This was a dog who's not used to being on a leash, much less being on a leash with somebody in a wheelchair. So there was lots of learning and many first steps I had to take with her. I had to learn to drive the Colorado mountains. And what I learned though, most importantly, and I hope you will hear this, is that taking the first step starts from inside of me. And that might be something to think about. Is there a first step for you that you're hesitating on? Something that you think maybe I can't do it. But think about that. Taking the first step starts from the inside. My second lesson for today I'd like to share with you is about listening deeply. So again, a story I'd like to tell is, about a year after I got hurt, I have my 4-wheel drive vehicle. I have my best buddy, Al, and we used to do a lot of biking together. So this time we're in Utah, and we're at a place called in the Canyonlands, and we're on the White Rim Trail. And the White Rim Trail is 110 miles of 4-wheel drive road, some of it very rocky, sandy, so on. I could drive it in. So here I am driving my new vehicle with hand control, 4-wheel drive on the edge of the Canyonlands. So Al would ride his bike, and me and Shadow, back in the day when you could take your dog back there, me and Shadow would drive, and we'd meet up at the end of the day at our designated campsites and share our stories of adventure. So one afternoon, I'm not yet to our campsite, and I decide to pull over and take a look at where I was, and this is very similar to where I was, and I was on the edge. And it might sound like everything was really great, and I got back to work, and now I'm driving a car, and I'm back with my dog, and living by myself, but there was a part of me I still wasn't very happy. Matter of fact, I was quite angry, and I was quite sad, and probably on the edge of depression, if not depressed. So I get out of the vehicle, unload my chair, put the wheels on, and I roll to the edge of this canyon, something very similar to this picture. And I'm thinking to myself, I really hate being in this wheelchair. I hate it. I don't like it. I can't ride my bike with Al. I can't take Shadow on our hikes and do the things I used to do. I haven't been able to get back to the mountains and take those students on those 2 and 3 week trips. And I'm at the edge of this canyon and I'm thinking, if I just go over, I'll be free. I'll be out of this wheelchair. I can feel the hot winds coming up from the bottom of the canyon surrounding me. I could hear the birds. The dust is starting to blow. And I'm like, I could be as free as that bird. I could be as free as this dust. Maybe I'll just go over the edge. And I get to the edge and, I know for sure that I'm going to die if I do that. So it wasn't like I was thinking I'm going to go kill myself. I was thinking, I just really want to be free. And then something happened inside of me that made me realize that I had to really listen a little bit more deeply to what's going on inside of me. And that there was a calling to come back from that edge, to know that there was something more for me in my life. And if I threw myself off that edge, I might be free for a few seconds, but then for sure I would be dead. And there really wouldn't be any freedom that I thought was going to be happening. So I go again to the words of Joseph Campbell. And he says, the opportunities to find deeper powers within ourselves comes when life seems most challenging. To really listen to, where are my powers? What am I not listening to inside of myself? Because surely that's the only place we're going to find these powers. So by listening deeply that day, I pulled myself off the edge. And I heard over time, that day and subsequent days and years, I still listen deeply. But that time I heard that there's something more for me to do in this world. I had a strong internal drive to help others. I had a curiosity about my own healing process, and I wanted to know what made me feel better. So by listening deeply, that started me on this path of higher education. So from that, I pursued my master's degree in exercise physiology because I thought, well, maybe it's about physical health. Maybe it's about physical fitness. They didn't teach me a lot about physical fitness and rehab. They taught me a lot about wheelchair skills and stuff like that, but I wanted to know, how does somebody with a disability get fit? So I got that master's degree in exercise physiology. I returned back to teaching for a year, and I'm like, you know what? I love teaching kids, but telling them to spit out their gum and dress out was like, there's more for me to do in my life. I heard about the nursing doctorate program that was based on the theory of human caring. And I thought, yeah, that's it. It's about human caring. That's what made me feel better. So I applied to the nursing doctorate program to be a nurse. I didn't get accepted the first time. I went right back to him and said, what is it, my disability? Oh, no, it's not your disability. I'm like, well, what is it? Well, we were concerned about you being able to do CPR. And I'm like, well, I'm already CPR trained and I've got advanced cardiac life support certification. I think I'm going to be okay. So I applied again. I got accepted. So that started me again on that road to what made me feel better. And I turned into a nurse. It wasn't easy, and that's a whole other talk. What it was like to go through nursing school in a wheelchair, for those of you who can imagine that. I hit a lot of those barriers, those attitudinal barriers, architectural barriers, and those access barriers, but I kept pursuing it. I did a 4-year doctoral program, 4,000 clinical hours. I did everything from emergency room to grabbing babies as they were birthed to being in the operating room where I just kind of dressed and sat in the corner because, infection control is really important in the OR. But what I learned is that in nursing, presence, being authentic and being real, that's where the healing takes place. So long story short, I feel like I'm probably skipping around. You're like, all right, where are you now? Well, I left Grand Junction to go to Denver. I did my nursing doctorate degree at the University of Colorado for 4 years. At my 4th year of my nursing doctorate program, I did a residency at Craig Hospital, in the very same hospital where I was a patient. Here I am, 8 years after being there as a patient. Now I'm working as a nurse. I was hired by Craig Hospital to develop the patient and family education program, which gave me a lot of opportunity to share what I learned and share what I know. Well, let me tell you a story. In those patient education classes, I had patients come. Actually, not too many people got out of coming to my classes because I said this is really important for you to be able to go on to learn about your spinal cord injury and your family, how they're going to help you, and what you need to do to stay healthy, and so on. So one day, Bubba showed up. Bubba and his wife, Katie, or I'm sorry, his mom, Katie, and Katie's pushing Bubba. Bubba's a handsome 20-something-year-old guy. Now, the only way I can describe what's going on with Bubba without getting into technical terms is that he was all messed up. So he had a series of medical complications that left him with neurological deficit, paralysis, some cognitive changes. He couldn't see very well. He couldn't talk. His mouth was stuck open. He had a trach in, as you can see. But I knew that there was something in Bubba that was really important for me to notice. I noticed he had a spirit about him. So Katie, his mom's pushing him into my wheelchair, in his wheelchair to my class. And I go right up to Bubba. And I say, Bubba, I'm really glad you're here. With a lot of passion. I'm like, where is this coming from? A lot of passion. I'm like, Bubba, I'm glad you're here. I know you can't talk very well, but I know that we can communicate. So I want you up close to me. So when I'm asking the class for their feedback or input, or do they get it? Do they not get it? You and I can make sure we're communicating. And he's like, he's giving me his shake. And I said, so how about if you know what's going on and you agree with me, or you want to say yes or something like that, you give me a thumbs up. So he was able to do that. And I said, if you're not really sure, you don't like it, you don't understand, give me one of these. And I said, if you're somewhere in between, do something like this. So we had this communication gig going on. So Bubba attended all 3 weeks of my classes. He never missed. He showed up. And as his vocalizations got better and his voice got better, he was able to say a few words and be a lot more interactive. But I knew he was always there with me. I even took Bubba out to a program that I started with my patients to spend some time with horses. Because that was another thing that I was wondering about, was that whole what made me feel better. And horses are really good with being present and being in the moment. So anyway, I took Bubba out to the barn. That's where we are that day. He's got the barn cat on his lap. So what I found out was that in this moment, with this one person, is the very reason we're here on earth at this time. Because I really came up to Bubba with a lot of passion, and I said, I really want you to be here, man. You're important to me. You got to learn this stuff. I know you're having a hard time right now, but I really want you here. He never backed down. He stayed with me in those classes. I even took him out to the horses. I even invited him to my guitar recital one night. Well, unfortunately for Bubba, he was discharged. He was making some great gains. And sadly, another medical complication took his life just a couple of years after he left our hospital. And his mom, Katie, let me know about this. And she said, I really want you to know something. And I said, I just love Bubba. She said, he really loved you too. And I said, really? I mean, I just felt like I was so passionate in his space about him showing up. She said, Bubba really loved you because you helped him feel normal. And I said, really? She said, yeah, you saw him. It didn't matter him being all messed up, but you saw the essence of Bubba, and you made sure that he saw you and that I saw him. So in this moment, with this one person, is the very reason we're here on this earth at this time. So is there someone in your life that you can show up for? Is there someone that you can look in their eyes and go, man, I really want you here. I really need you here. What's going on with you? Let me help you. So by giving back, I received so much. I was a middle school PE teacher when I got hurt. Well, since then, I've really expanded my teaching repertoire. I had to learn how to verbally give directions better. I instituted experiential learning into my patient education classes. So my patients were doing some of the things that I would have done out in my Outward Bound courses. I increased my own self-awareness and growth. I had to really look at some really hard places inside of me so that I could move forward. I had to really experience and understand self-compassion and self-forgiveness. Because if I couldn't be compassionate with myself, there's no way I can be compassionate to the people who are in front of me. I had to learn to accept loving in my life, and I met my partner soon after I got hurt, and I've been with the same partner for almost 32 years now. So I had to learn about commitment. I had to learn about giving into loving, not just loving of myself, but also to be loved. And I learned so much. I mean, so much that I am so fortunate to be able to give back, but also through that to receive. So what I found is that the antidote to exhaustion isn't rest. It's about wholeheartedness. And what I offer you today is the example of my life and the lessons that I've learned. And the stories that I tell are about being wholehearted and about pursuing the things in my life and listening deeply so that I can give back. Because if I think about everything I've done and it wasn't in a wholehearted way, I would be exhausted. I would be flattened on the ground. But I would encourage you to think about and to act from the place of wholeheartedness to not be exhausted. So my end notes are these. And I ask you to think about, where can you take the first step in your life? Now, remember, the things that I've shared with you over the course of 32 years all required a very first small step. That might be a change in thinking, that might be taking physical action, that might be picking up the phone, that might be, filling out that application for something you really wanted to do and you just held back. I would also encourage you to listen deeply. Spend some time in self-reflection, like, what's really calling you? And to not be looking for those calls on the outside. Who's gonna ask me to do something? Go inside. What do you want to do? Listen deeply. What are you being called to? And at every opportunity, to look for ways to give back, whether that be to an individual in your life, someone in your family, people in your not so immediate family, in your community, to the world. All of us need each other now, especially in these times of isolation and physical distancing. People with disabilities know about that. How have you survived? How are all these other people going to do it? Share your wisdom with others, and maybe that will help them. That's a possibility to give back. I also want to make sure that I thank those guides, mentors, family members, and friends in my family who've assisted me. I didn't do this alone. Many, many guides. In Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey model, he talks about mentors and guides all along the way. And sometimes they showed up in places I didn't even expect. I definitely want to thank my partner, Sharon. The picture that you're seeing on the left is us. I have a mountain bike that I'm able to get into the backwoods and be on top of mountains again. So in that picture, I'm at 10,000 feet on the Grand Mesa of Western Colorado. But my two present dogs. So I've had 13 animals over my 32 years, but these are my two present dogs. Bucky in the red, he only has one eyeball. He's my special needs boy. And then Shamley in the black, who's black. She is my therapy dog. Actually, we're a therapy team. And so we've been recently deemed as a therapy team, and we're able to go visit people and we just want to help people feel better. I've also done a lot with horses in the last 12 to 15 years. And this is a horse that I've ridden for the last 5 years. We've done some competitions. He's always good for a photo op. So I really believe, though, that I want to leave you with this lasting thought, is I really believe in the transformative power of relationship. Because that's what I found, what made me feel better. It was relationship with myself, relationship with my caregivers and those around me and my family, and also with my animals. Because animals can really help us just be present and just know that we're okay just in that moment. And that your life has the potential for fullness and grace. I offer these to you, and I offer this in gratitude for the National Ataxia Foundation for having me today. We'll go one more slide. If you care to direct some questions to me individually, there's my contact information. You can shoot me an email. Certainly, if you want, you can pick up the phone and call me. If I'll answer if I can, and if I'm not, I'll get back to you. But I would certainly love to have a conversation. So Lori, I'm going to turn this back over to you. And let me know what questions or themes of questions we have that folks may have put in the chat box.
Well, thanks so much, Terry, for all the hopeful and helpful information that you shared today. It's certainly been far-reaching. We have attendees here from so many places: Iowa, Texas, California, New York City, North Carolina, Toronto, South Dakota, and several others. We are, as Terry mentioned, going to begin answering questions. As a reminder, you can still submit your questions through the control panel, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as time allows. A question that we have here, Terry, from one of our attendees, they appreciate your positive message. So how do you interact with people who keep saying, I can't, or woe is me, or life isn't fair? I have little or no patience for people who want to be a victim. What is your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that come to mind. One is that everybody has a right to be however they want to. So, and what I mean by that is we all have a choice. And I appreciate the word victim in there, because we have a choice of being a victim, or do we choose to have a creator mindset? And I know that can be very difficult to help people move out of that victim mindset. But I think by just challenging, what are they, I think another way to look at this is what are they getting from staying in that victim mindset? Because there's a reward. So I would challenge them and say, what's good about this? What's working for you when you're in that victim mindset, in that victimhood? Start with that, and then go, okay, so what's not working? What's really not working about that? And elicit that from the person themselves. Because I can't tell somebody what's good and what's bad. What I'm trying to do is elicit what's their motivation for change. For those of you familiar with motivational interviewing, you might hear about what I'm talking about. So we're wanting what's good, what's not so good, and then say, and then repeat that back to them. Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is, well, this stuff's not really working for you, and here's some things you're getting from it. And then you might say, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how ready are you to change? Again, asking the person their own readiness, not me telling them, oh, you need to change, but eliciting it from them. How ready are you to change on a scale of 1 to 10? And then, maybe they're like, I'm really not ready to change. Okay, so tell me more about that. Tell me about what would help you be more ready to change. Maybe it's resources, maybe it's support, maybe it's like I don't have any confidence in myself. Oh, that would lead me to my next question. How confident are you can change? And they might say, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, I don't have any confidence. So what I'm trying to model here is to get into conversation with people, to really find out what's underneath all of this. And then all I would do is say, well, sounds like, you've got some good things going, not so good things going. You're ready. Maybe you're kind of ready. Maybe you're not. Maybe you got some confidence. Well, here might be some resources for you. Here might be an opportunity for you to learn something or join something, or maybe the place down the road needs a volunteer, or maybe somebody needs help with, a phone bank or something. But we can't make people change. Okay, we can't. All I can do is, like my slide here says, open a space for healing. Open that space for people to do whatever it is they need to do to work through what's going on with them. I hope that helps.
Great, thanks, Jerry. Another one of our attendees would like to know how you overcame some of the financial challenges of not being as active as you were prior.
Sure. Well, from the beginning, this is again another mindset thing. Okay, this is really important that you all hear this. From the beginning, I said, I'm going to make this work for me. I'm going to make this work for me. I'm a PE teacher. Now I'm in a wheelchair. What am I going to do? And so what I did was I said, I'm going back to work. From the beginning, 5 months after I got hurt, I was determined I'm going to go back, because my students at my middle school had just had a classmate complete suicide. I did not want to leave them with this idea that when things get bad, you just blow your head off, which is what that student did. I was bound and determined to make this work for me. So I found a way to teach in a wheelchair. I found a way to get back to officiating. I went back to school. I found grants. I asked for scholarships. I did not take public assistance. One time, and I will tell you, I went to see if I could get, I went to vocational rehab, because I was going to change, I was going to go to graduate school and all that. So I was advised, just go to voc rehab. They'll help you with that. So the first question in voc rehab I was asked was, did you go back to work? And I'm like, absolutely. I was all proud. Yeah, I went back to work. Yeah. Oh, we can't help you. I'm like, wow. So what I am aware of for all of you out there is that there's a lot of what we call disincentivizing. So that to try to get ahead means that you're going to lose something. So I'm aware of that. So there are some real situations where you need to have your public support, your financial assistance to have your home health care, to have the things of the basic necessities, which then if you go too far in your own making money, that falls away. So I understand that. I'm just letting you know what I did for myself at the beginning, that I was going to make this work for me. So I use my story I share my story to inspire others. I've used this opportunity for creativity to create programs that are far out, like taking patients from a rehab program out to a horse barn. Are you kidding me? Yeah, I'm not kidding you. I do that kind of stuff. I reach beyond, I go beyond. I make this work for me.
That's great. Thanks, Terry, for sharing that. Also wanted to share with you and give a shout out to the attendees that have continued to let us know where they're attending from. We have attendees from Nebraska, Australia, Florida, California, and Oregon as well. So far-reaching your messages are today, indeed.
Anybody from New Zealand? Wait, I want anybody from New Zealand, because I've been to New Zealand.
No New Zealand, but that is on my bucket list of places.
All right. Well, shout out to Australia, though. You're kind of close. I'll get there someday soon, I hope.
I hope I do as well. An attendee would like to know if you could send or share the authors of the books that you had referred to in your talk, and wanted to thank you for your messages. It was the nudge that they needed.
Good. So on the PDF handout that I sent, those have the quotes and they have the authors of those. I mean, I didn't put the books, but I did put the, so Joseph Campbell is one of them. And you can look him up. He's got a book called Hero with 1,000 Faces. Another author that I quoted was David White. And David White is a poet and an author, a prose author, really, really good. I was trying to think. He has a book called The Heart Aroused. I'm looking at my bookshelf right here. So David White, I look him up. He's really great. Jean Watson, Dr. Jean Watson is a nurse theorist, and the founder, or her theory is the theory of human caring. And it was her theory that the nursing program that I attended, so you can look up Jean White, or I'm sorry, Dr. Jean Watson for human caring. She has lots of books as well.
Great. And that handout that Terry mentioned is available to download. It's in the handout section of your control panel. And if anyone has any problems downloading the handout, please email naf@ataxia.org. We'd be happy to supply that handout as an attachment in an email as well. One of our attendees would like to hear your thoughts on how to deal with an unsupportive spouse.
Well, first of all, my heart goes out to you, because I think one of the things that helped me was having the mentors, guides, friends, and families along the way. And an unsupportive spouse or someone that's not being supportive of you is certainly, troubling. But one of the questions I would ask back to you is, how is it that you are not supporting yourself? where inside are you not standing up for yourself, not seeking the support that you require, need, and where are you not supporting yourself? Because again, I understand the need for help from the outside. I get that. I do. And at the same time, I would encourage you to look at what can you do to strengthen yourself from inside. I think another thing I'd like to ask people is that I'm very interested in being able to provide some other webinars or other teaching, learning, processing opportunities for people in your community. And I would be interested if you could let Lori know or put them in the chat box or somehow, what are some other things? And I'm kind of looking along the lines of, communication patterns, self-reflections, how do we really get to what's going on inside of us? What are some ways that I can help you strengthen those internal structures that you need? So if you could let Lori know that would help me know if there's more that I could offer this community. I would really appreciate that.
Great advice. And I'd certainly love to get that feedback from you guys. One of our attendees says that he has SDA2 and his challenges differ. His biggest challenge is adapting to his declining abilities. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, it's a challenge. I mean, I appreciate your challenge. And I think that probably a key word that I heard is that adapting. So one of the things that we often hear, well, just accept where you're at, just accept your disability, accept this, accept that. And I really disagree with that. I really think that what all of us have to do to be successful in this is how do we adapt? How do we adapt on a day-to-day, sometimes minute-by-minute basis on the changes that are going inside of us? So I applaud you for saying that word, for sharing that. It's an adaptation process. That's what everybody in the world right now is trying to do. And those of us who've had disability, those of you who are dealing with your changes that are happening maybe even more progressively than you care to have, we're learning this. This is where people in the disability community can be helping all those other people. Sharing, how do you adapt? How do you adapt to social isolation, physical distance? How do you adapt to not having the resources at your fingertips like you did before all of this started? So I don't know if I answered the gentleman's question, but I really want to answer it in a way of acknowledging that adaptation is the key here. And not just, accepting, because that to me gets us back into the victim role. It's how do I adapt? How do I adapt? How do I continue to be in control of my world, even though it might be slipping away from me on a day-to-day basis? That would be the key.
That's great advice. Another attendee would like to know what steps you can take to figure out what to do with the rest of your life when you have problems walking.
Well, okay, I don't want to sound too harsh, but I think walking's overrated. Okay, because there's a lot you can do that have nothing to do with walking. Okay, yeah, I can walk, and it's hard, but everything I've done has not hinged on can I walk or not. So I would challenge you to go, what is it about walking that defines you? And is that how you're defining yourself? That if you're the only way you can define yourself is if you're walking. So that would be my first question. The second question would be, what contribution can you make that has nothing to do with walking? Really, seriously. And is there an untapped resource inside of you? Your intellect, your compassion, your ability to problem solve that can be useful that has nothing to do with walking.
And we have another question. Do you think denial is healthy as a way of adapting?
That's a great question because I think denial can be actually helpful. I mean, seriously, because to a point, because if you think about if we didn't have denial as kind of a protection, think about how we could get mowed over with what is going on with physical change, with what's going on in the world. So I do think that denial can be protective, and I think that there's a point where denial can be not helpful and can be actually maladaptive and keep us stuck, keep us from really understanding what's going on and the possibility of what's ahead of us. So I appreciate the question. That could probably be a whole session in itself, and I do appreciate it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Terry.
You bet.
We have one more question here.
Sure.
Dealing with progressive diseases. So I think this person is wondering about, constant changes that need to be adapted to or thought about through the progression of a disease like ataxia.
Mm-hmm. So can you restate that again? I wasn't quite sure what the question was in that.
Sure, your thoughts on dealing with progressive diseases.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, this is a challenge. I don't negate it. I don't minimize it. And again, I want you to point you to what's the opportunity here? What's the opportunity for creativity? What's the opportunity for learning something new, doing something different? And it might be, I mean, and again, I don't want to sound like I've got rose-colored glasses on and everybody can figure this out. These are real challenges. And I have a lot of compassion for you, and to have compassion for your own self in dealing with these things, and not to be too hard on yourself. Some days you might be like, yeah, I got this, I can do this, I can figure something out. And some days it's like, I'm just going to go to that edge and roll off. I would encourage you to stop at the edge though and go, all right, let me think about this. What's the deeper calling here? What's the deeper message that is calling me? So again, I want to just encourage all of you to consider what's the deeper calling here for you. And we could go into things like spirituality, we can go into purpose in life, we could go into healing of inside yourself, healing relationship. There's lots of things that could go with this deeper opportunity and deeper listening.
All right, so that is all we have time for today. Wanted to remind everyone that a recording of today's webinar will be made available, and also wanted to give a reminder out about the handout that's available to download in the handout section of your control panel. And if you're having any problems downloading that handout, we'll be happy to email that to you if you'd like. And if you have any additional questions that you think of after today's webinar, they can be sent to the contact information that Terry provided or to us at naf@ataxia.org. I'd like to thank so much again to our presenter, Terry Chase, and to all of you. We really appreciate you joining us for today's webinar. Stay safe and healthy, everyone.
You bet. Thank you so much. And again, my heart goes out to all of you. And I definitely appreciate Lori and the efforts of the National Ataxia Foundation providing support and education to all of you out in the world. Take care now.
Thanks, Terry. Bye, all.